On this episode of the Endurance Hour podcast, the pros and cons of clip-in pedals, time versus distance for your bike workouts, the value of being coached versus self-coached, when you should make the switch regardless of your experience, when is it okay to push through your workout when the motivation isn't there or you're just not feeling it, should you try and make up missed workouts, and weight loss goals, realistic expectations during training and on race day. The Endurance Hour podcast starts right now.
Are you listening? Damn.
We begin with Anne. She writes here, I am following your couch to sprint plan, which I can find on Training Peaks, and looking to upgrade my bicycle. Should I get clip-in pedals? And what are the pros and cons? And this is one of those questions when you really start getting into the sport of when and which pieces of equipment you upgrade. And this is a personal preference, I think, but also an experience question of how experienced you are on your bicycle. What do you say, Wendy?
Yeah, those are good points. Now, when I started triathlon, I did my first race on a mountain bike, and I didn't even know what clip-in pedals were. Like, I didn't even know there was such a thing.
You did that in 1965, too. It was a long time ago when you did your first triathlon.
And so, again, I think being your first race, whatever you have on your bike, I think is sufficient because it's your first race. You don't know how long you're going to be in the sport. You know, you may be one and done. And so why invest in more equipment that you might not need after this first race? So I wanted to start off with that. Second, if you do end up getting clip-in pedals, and you have to purchase shoes, you have to purchase pedals, you have to kind of get a new bike fit a little bit to make sure you're producing the most power, a cleat fit more or less. And so the expense does go up. And if you do this, you will be able to produce more power, which will hopefully equate to more speed as you're pedaling your bike. You're going to learn to pedal in circles. You're going to learn to engage all your muscle groups, quads, hamstrings, calves. And so I think there's definitely a big pro to using clipless pedals.
I agree. Totally. My first was also it was like a cross mountain bike, and I had the shoes that I just put into the cages, and you can tighten those cages down somewhat to help you with the full range of motion on the pull and the push of the pedal stroke. But you're also going to be running those same shoes that you were riding in. So it's kind of a weird thing of you can get some hot spots underneath your foot depends on how the foot is positioned.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention, I did this video triathlon then and now, and I talk about what kind of equipment and what kind of gear I used, 30 years ago compared to what I use now. The benefit of not having clipless pedals is you're riding assumingly in your running shoes. So it makes for a quicker transition to get off your bike and have your shoes on to just head out for the run.
But there is some efficiency of having that foot part of the bicycle when you are clipped in, because you are one with the bicycle. There's nothing loose there. There's no chance of you slipping out. I've heard people say that when you do get those type of clip-in pedals, that maybe you want to practice on grass or in a field in case you fall down, and also practice clipping in and clipping out. And then depends on the more and more you get into it, the question will become: do I put my shoes on my bicycle in transition? Do I put them on and run with them? We've covered that in previous topics. But for this one right here, the pros and cons, like Wendy said, it's your first time. Go with what you have. If you want to invest in more, then it becomes more of an investment, because you're talking multiple layers here: the shoes, the clips underneath, the type of pedals you have to buy to put on your bicycle. And then what kind of bicycle do you have? Do you already have a road bike, or is it a tri-bike? But since you're doing couch to sprint, you probably have a basic bike, most likely.
It could be a mountain bike. It could be a cross bike.
Yeah.
And just stressing the importance of practice. Don't put them on the day before the race and go racing them. Chances are high you're going to fall as you're practicing clipping in and out. So, start with it. Maybe if you have an indoor trainer, maybe start getting used to clipping in and out stationary. And then, like Dave said, go on the grass and then practice in your neighborhood, because you just want to remember when you're approaching a stop sign or a stoplight, you have to unclip. And it's a little bit different. And that's usually where people will fall to the side, because they're slowing down and they forget they have to unclip. in order to stop.
And you said something that was important is a bike fit. And for Ann and anyone else who is looking to make that transition, there is a position where the what part of the foot is that called? Whatever the front part of the foot is called, not the heel, but the forefront.
The forefoot.
Yeah, the forefoot.
Forefoot.
Yeah, you can be too far forward based on how the clips are underneath the shoe, or too far back, and that may affect your mechanics. Whether it's your knee alignment, your hip, how your foot is in it, and how you press down. There needs to be a certain balance of where that is, and you need to have fitted correctly. You can get cramping issues in your calf if you're doing it the wrong way on how you push and pull. So I don't want to scare anyone away from getting clip-in pedals, but there are some things that you got to balance out.
Yeah.
Good question, Ann. We've all been there, and some of us who are listening, are making that transition. So good question about upgrading your bike and getting clip-in pedals. This one from David. I know hills are making me stronger, but still it takes quite a bit out of me. David, I've been there. I know what you mean. When riding outdoors during my longer endurance ride, should I focus more on time instead of distance? Wendy?
Again, that's a great question. So let's touch on the hill portion. Hills are great. You only really get experience specifically riding downhill is when you ride your bike outside. You're not going to get that same downhill feel by riding hilly courses indoors, like on a program like Zwift or Trainer Road. So definitely get that hilly experience outside as much as you can for that downhill and the balance. And again, clipping in and clipping out, getting used to that. And riding hills will slow you down. So if you're used to riding courses inside or riding flat courses, you're going to be a little bit faster overall than if you ride a hilly course. So the question of time versus distance, and we talk a lot about this in some of the programs, some of the training programs we created on Training Peaks, is it really could go either way. Your body knows time. So if you're on like a 3-hour ride, some days you might complete 30 or 40 miles on a hilly course in 3 hours. And some days you may complete 40 to 50, maybe even up to 60 miles or more on a flat course, depending on your fitness level. Your body has no idea whether it's ridden 40 miles or 60 miles. Now, so riding by time or distance is definitely just really up to you. If your training plan calls for a 50-mile ride and you're choosing to do it on a more elevated course, and you only have 3 hours, and maybe last week you rode 50 miles in 3 hours, but this week you only rode 40, again, do what you can based on your schedule. And I think more importantly is following intensity levels. Your body knows, is it a 3-hour ride easy effort? Is it 3 hours of hard effort? So making sure you're following those principles of hard, easy, or moderate effort, and time or distance, it's just preference. Oh, one thing I wanted to say is if you are training for like a 70.3 or 140.6 Ironman distance, then as you get in that race specificity, I think sometimes getting out for longer rides by distance, because you have to complete the distance in a race setting. So at least one ride where you're targeting a certain distance, like 100 miles, is more important than the time. So you just know what it feels like to ride 100 miles if you've never done it before.
Yeah, I'm thinking it depends on what the plan calls for. Like if I go out, I'll go out thinking I'm going to do 20 miles, or I go out hey, I only have so much time. I'm going to go 30 minutes out, 30 minutes back.
Yeah.
Or I'll find my loop, and if I need to get a certain mileage in, personal preference or because the plan calls for it, I get to a certain point and going, okay, I've gone this far. Let me just go an extra mile out and back this way, and that way I make sure I get my full 20, for example. I've only made 9 miles and I'm at my halfway point usually. Well, let me just kind of go over there and come back, and then I'll come back because I know how much I have left over to get back. But yeah, I agree with that. Doing the distance for like the full distance Ironman, you got to get out there and do that. And
even if you're training for a sprint, if you've never ridden a sprint distance, which is 12.4 miles, make sure you do that so you know what it feels like to do 12.4 miles instead of time. Because then again, depending on your fitness level and your experience, if some people will ride 10 miles in 1 hour, some people will ride 10 miles in 30 minutes or less. So whatever you decide to do, kind of keep track of it. Keep track, was my intention today to go by time, or was my intention today to go by distance? So you can look back at your training to determine what's working for you and what's not.
I think about this too when I know ahead of time when I'm going outside. Like, let's say we have this Mount Spokane is nearby. It's a Spokane Park, the park area. And I know it's a climb. It's about 12 miles. I mean, there's like an 8 or 10 mile section that's a gradual incline the entire way. But my plan is to get to that point, no matter how long it takes me, because I know that's the workout. I'm looking to do a gradual hill climb workout that day, or I'm looking to do a hard efforts on a flat surface, so I know my plan going out. Like, all right, I'm going to try to do a hard flat section, however long it takes me to get it, great. Or if I'm going to do some climbs, I'm picking the route based on what I'm doing that day. So whatever, again, this probably falls back on what does the plan call for? Does it call for distance or power or however long you're out there? Then you just pick your route accordingly, I think.
Yeah.
Speaking of plans, this is from Susan, and this is not a question that no one has ever asked. It's usually a question everyone asks. What advice on getting a coach versus being self-coached? Coach, Wendy, coach or self-coached?
I had a conversation with this last night with an athlete who's looking into coaching, and currently she follows a general plan that she found on Training Peaks. And so the main difference between coached and not coached, number one, is coaching will give you education and accountability. I think those are the two key reasons people hire a coach. Some athletes may be self-motivated to get in the workouts themselves, so they don't need so much accountability, but having a coach will provide that education, because we're kind of looking at the big picture that the athletes sometimes don't even know. The athletes may be making comments or suggestions or questions, and the coach knows exactly where the athlete could stray because they just don't quite know why they're asking the question or where they're going with it. Now, a self-coached athlete, someone who prefers, like myself, I have my life schedule. My schedule is pretty flexible with my job and my training, and so I've been doing the sport long enough that I don't want someone telling me what to do on certain days. I like to kind of pick and choose based on my schedule and how I'm feeling today. So if I've had coaches before and I followed the plan that, when I had coaches before, I mean, I didn't stray. The reason I was paying them is so they could tell me exactly what to do, and I was going to follow it to see where it took me. But then I realized over time that I have that education. I hold myself accountable, and I'm fine being the self-coached athlete. So it really goes back to the why. If you're thinking about getting a coach, make sure you interview a few coaches that you're thinking about hiring. Make sure their philosophy aligns with yours. And again, ultimately make sure you answer that question of why would you need a coach? Are you looking for a training plan, the accountability, the education, whatever it is?
It's similar to going to college, where you're paying professors to teach you everything they know and they've learned over the years. You
Right.
hire someone to tell you in an hour and a half what it took them 20 years to figure out.
Right.
Or,
And that's a really good point too. Yeah.
similar to even buying training courses when you want to learn about a special skill or piano, for example. You can buy a piano program or buy a video course on how to play the piano, or you can try to figure it out yourself.
Right.
How much time do you have in your hands?
Right. And that's a good point. I use my education, but more importantly, I use my personal experience as a coach. Because I've been doing it for 30 years, been there, done that, I know what athletes don't know, so I'm better able to prepare them. And I'm still the coach athlete in training. So I still experience mental and physical barriers, obstacles that I can share my experiences with athletes I coach, because chances are high if they think it might happen to them, it's probably already happened to me. So instead of trying to figure it out on their own, just ask me and I'll tell you the answer, or I'll share a video with you that I created that helps answer your question and guide you in the right direction.
And listen to this, even elite and professional triathletes have coaches. Mm-hmm. And there's a benefit to having someone else see you from a different point of view than you seeing yourself. and being able to analyze what you don't recognize because you're too into it, where someone can step back and go, I noticed a trend that maybe you didn't notice in your results or in your training, or your pace, your heart rate that you didn't pick up on because I'm looking at you objectively, and you see yourself and are emotionally invested, where I can look at you as an athlete.
Yes, and I agree. I had a coach in 2008. I had the same coach in 2009, and then I took a break from coaching, and then I had a different coach. I think in 2014, I hired someone new. So I've only had 2 triathlon coaches in my life, but I've learned so much from them that has also, helped me as a coach learn what other coaches are doing. And through their experiences, I think it was very beneficial at the time when I was really needing a coach.
And you've probably heard, and this can be in different industries, where someone switches coaches just to get a fresh perspective or fresh point of view. Nothing wrong with the previous coach, but maybe you've been with someone for 5 years. It's like, I just want to try something new to change it up, to reinvigorate myself, or it's almost like getting a second opinion from a physician.
Yeah.
It's not just one point of view is the only point of view. There could be different ways of doing something or approaching training or something about what you do. And it's good to have a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple ways in a training plan to get the same adaptation. One coach might do it this way, another coach might do it this way, but we're both trying to do the same thing as far as what kind of training stimulus and adaptation we're going for from a training perspective. Some coaches communicate more than others. So again, going back to, if you're seeking out coaching, make sure you look at a variety of coaches to see what they do and make sure it aligns with your philosophy and your why and what you're needing.
And I've heard this too. Some athletes want to be hands off and just want to be told what to do, while other people want their hand held during the training. So you might need to try out a few coaches to see which one fits your best personality and talks to you and communicates to you to make the most effective way, because everyone has different communication styles.
Yep. Good points.
From Debbie, I've been struggling with my swim workouts, motivation, and fatigue. When is it okay to push through a swim workout when I should stop? And when should I stop?
That's a great question. And my answer applies to any workout you're doing, whether it's a swim, bike, or run, or just a different sport. If you're fatigued, you got to ask, why are you fatigued? Are you fatigued because you're training too much, because you're swimming too much in this case, or it's a nutritional issue, or it's just a lack of sleep issue and you're overwhelmed with life? Then I would say, or maybe you're getting sick, so look at the why and the reason you're feeling the way you're feeling. And then as far as look at the workout, is it a recovery swim? Is it an intensity swim? If the purpose of the goal of the swim is at a certain intensity or race effort or, speed effort, and you're just not really feeling it because of the fatigue, and there's other motivational reasons, then, either turn it into a recovery workout or cut the intervals in half, cut the workout in half, the distance in half, and call it quits. Make a note of it. Again, the importance of keeping a log so you know why you decided to end that workout early. Communicate that with your coach if you have one. And, keep keeping those log notes so you can see a trend on what you're doing. Are you always bailing on the more intense workouts because they're harder, or are you always bailing on another workout? So again, keeping those log notes of what you're doing, I think, is really critical. And I think it's always okay, no matter what, if you are not feeling the training that you started and you're feeling like, I'm just not there today, mentally or physically, call it quits. I mean, it's always okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, this one is a similar question, but maybe you have a different answer for this one, because David has an Ironman coming up. He says, question for you: life comes and things get busy. I find it harder and harder to get my mind motivated on the training. Do you run into that from time to time, or your athletes that you train have this issue? I have the goal to complete an Ironman, and it's getting close. I would think I would be getting more motivated since the race is so close. Just want to hear your thoughts on that. I don't know, why wouldn't you be motivated, but maybe the overwhelmingness of it is scaring him away? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, so I'm looking at my phone because I know David personally, and he actually texted me this question, and that's why I wanted to put it on the podcast, because I think it's a question a lot of athletes are going to have at some point in their life. So I think the main thing is, why are you not motivated, and what are you not motivated to do? And once we got to that answer, for him, he dreaded the long rides. He's got an Ironman in, less than a month, and getting in. We talked about distances for an Ironman. Getting in those 70, 80, 100-mile rides are very important when it comes to Ironman training. This being his first Ironman, he's getting a lot of experience, and now he knows training for an Ironman, especially one in April, this time of year with the weather, it's been very difficult to get outside. So lack of motivation from training indoors can be really hard on some athletes. And so, we chatted about make sure he focuses on his why. Why did he sign up for the Ironman? Because that is usually, I think, the best motivator is remembering your why and your reason, and knowing that, you can get through this first one, but before you sign up for a second one, make sure you recognize what your barriers were when training for the first one, and maybe choose, the Sprint Olympic or half Ironman based on your desire for how much time you want to train. And in David's case, he's okay for like doing a 3-hour ride, but beyond that, he just dreads it. And, you shouldn't have to train or do something that you're dreading. That doesn't make the whole process fun. And we chatted about just he's getting some good experience, and he's learning a lot about himself through this experience. And so hopefully that'll help.
I don't know, David. I don't know his situation, but you can comment on this. When he says life comes and things get busy, one thing that popped into my head was if you have a support system around you that is on board with what you're doing and doesn't resent that you have a 5-hour bike ride, those kind of things can, really damage your psyche. It's like, oh, so-and-so back home is, giving me crap, or I know they're upset that I'm out here and they don't really support or understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. Therefore, I'm not as excited or happy about what I'm doing. Does that relate to David, or do you have a comment about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that relates to David. We didn't get into that, but I'm sure that's a possibility. That reminds me of, like athletes, in that year of COVID, 2020, some athletes had, were working from home. They actually started to have more time to train, or so they really got into training, and now they're back, they have to go to work now. And so training time isn't as limited more than it was. And that could be a motivational factor. But I like how you bring up the support group, because if you don't have that support, it makes it so much harder to get out there knowing that maybe your family is just waiting for you to come home because they want to spend time with you. And that's really hard. There's been years where I don't do an Ironman every year. When I do an Ironman, I know it's because I know what the training entails, and that's something I want to do. And I do have family support. So I'm very fortunate. But I'll tell you what, there's been years where I'm like, I couldn't even go beyond a 10-mile run. I'm like done, like 10 miles on the road. It's just all mentally and physically I could handle that year because of other things going on in my life took priority.
This is something for families and families with kids, is that talk to them ahead of time or look at the year and go, hey, so-and-so, I'm thinking about doing this. Which of these, maybe give your husband or wife or boyfriend, girlfriend, some options of like, I'm thinking about doing these amount of races or these specifically. How does that fit with your schedule? That way they have a say.
Good idea.
And they can be supportive, and then you both know and already understand going in, okay, we've both agreed that during this lead up, I'm going to be having some long weekends. And that was one of the things I talked to my wife about is, all right, I'm going to do this at the end of the year, which means once it gets close, I need to be outside more, or I'm not going to, these weekends, yes, I'll go earlier in the morning, but we both know and we both agree and understand the time commitment associated with this distance. Of course, the sprints and Olympics are more manageable for most people, and then the halves get a little more, and the fulls that is a lifestyle. That is a definite lifestyle that people need to be on board with and know that Yeah, so-and-so, daddy or mommy, they're at the pool. Or dad went out for a ride. He'll be back in 4 hours.
Right.
Let's plan things. And then as a parent, and this is something I'm constantly learning and growing with, is help the family members plan their day as well. What can you do to set them up to succeed and be happy, whether it's helping make breakfast or helping make dinner or doing things that it's not all about you, that you are on board with their goals too.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's great advice. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes we learn that. I learned that the hard way. And I've learned that over the years, thanks to other coaches and fellow athletes, that let's make sure that everyone's on board before we make the commitment. And how can I do something for them so they are there to support me when it's my turn? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next question here. This is from Christina, and she says to Wendy, skiing was great last weekend, and I didn't do my planned workout because I had a great weekend skiing. How do you make up for those workouts that I don't do? Or should I all just move on, skip it, and don't worry about it?
The first answer is going to be skip it, don't worry about it. The saying is most of the time you can't make up missed workouts, because if you try to make up missed workouts, the impact of that will affect the current workouts or the future, next day or two or next week workouts. So when you are someone who skips some workouts, in her case, she went skiing. So at least she was cross training, and that's going to strengthen her legs, and that's going to help some cardiovascular, at least she's skipping her training program to do other training. Mm-hmm. So other athletes out there, when you do miss workouts, always question, why did you miss it? Did you miss it because of work, family, you were sick, you were injured? And that will often dictate how to, maybe make up some time or just skip it and let it go, or how long you've missed. In her case, I suggested maybe add a little bit of time to your bike in the following week, or add a couple more miles to your runs in the following week that you missed, because she missed a couple runs and a ride over the weekend. So it really just, always depends on the reason you missed. But generally saying, I'd say don't make up missed workouts. It has too much impact on future workouts. And
where it is in your plan, right? I mean, Christina shouldn't be doing a ski weekend when you're 2 weeks away from a big race.
You know what? That's a very good point. It does depend on where you are in your plan, how you should, quote unquote, make it up what you just missed. Because if it was a key workout that was really important for your race that's in the next 3 or 4 weeks, maybe that is the time to just do a little bit modification and say, okay, if you missed a long ride on Sunday because you were skiing and you have time to do it on Wednesday because it was a key long run, maybe you make it up on Wednesday, but you have to also modify the workouts before and the workouts after that Wednesday workout. Yeah. Which is that's another benefit of having a coach. Mm-hmm. A coach will help you make those modifications when you just don't have the experience or unsure of how to do it yourself.
That is excellent. I was just thinking about that when you said, let's say if someone has a big key workout that they miss, they can make it up. Well, then you modify the swim, or the coach can recognize, you know what, Christina, your swim is you're nailing your swims. We can afford to miss a swim or minimize the time spent in the pool this week in order to get this key bike workout, because that is where you need to maintain and build a better base of endurance and fitness for this upcoming race. So
exactly,
I can see that as a coach.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Last one here, and it's a lengthy question, probably a lot of different questions. There are a lot of questions in this one, but we'll finish off with this from Sean. So Sean's training for his first half. He's pretty confident. He intends to execute Wendy's training plan as close to 100% as possible, which is nearly impossible. Anyone knows that it's rare that you can do all 100% workouts, but great, he's committed to it. Sean's 200 pounds. He wants to be 20 pounds lighter than that for race day. Do you have any guidance on weight loss while in training? And he apparently has a plant-based diet, and he thinks he can lose 2 pounds a week while training. And while training, he says he can lose 1 to 1.5 pounds per week safely while still building that needed strength and endurance to be ready. Should he maintain the weight or should he try to lose some weight for the race?
Again, a great question, pretty common among athletes. And, we get into this race weight. And so my first question back is, when is the last time you weighed 20 pounds less? I mean, that's important. Is losing 20 pounds, is that a realistic and attainable goal based on your history and when you weighed that last? Number two, I think more importantly than weight loss is body fat loss. So getting your body fat analysis, I think the gold standard, which is one I just got about 2 months ago, is a DEXA scan. It's a little pricey, but if you really want to know your percent body fat and you want to know how much fat do you have to lose, that's really important for any athlete out there trying to lose weight when they start training. Number three, a lot of the, education articles from dietitians out there will say in training is not the best time to lose weight. If you're trying to lose weight, you should try to lose it in the, quote unquote off season or out of season. And at the same time, sometimes it's harder to lose weight in your out of season because you're not training as much. And to lose weight, you want to expend more calories than you intake. Number four, I think if you're someone who's out there trying to lose weight, know what your baseline is. Go to a calorie counter. Like there's an app that my husband shared with me. It's called Lose It. A lot of people use MyFitnessPal. Get your baseline calories that you're normally eating without even thinking. You're not trying to lose weight. You're just keeping a really good food log, so your percentages of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and at least a baseline caloric consumption, so you can safely do it where, to lose a pound of fat, that's 3,500 calories. So if you decrease your calories by 250 and expend an extra 250 calories a day, that's 500 calorie deficit. You do that over the course of a week, that's a 3,500 calorie deficit. That's a pound of fat loss, theoretically. Again, there's a lot of factors that impact fat loss, but that's my advice for those athletes trying to lose weight. And I think the final point I want to make is I wouldn't try very hard. I would first see what you're doing from a training perspective, seeing if just adding the additional training and exercise to your daily life more than you were doing before, if that kind of just takes care of it yourself. And again, also keep a log. A lot of athletes, myself included, back in the day when I started, I would overconsume. The more training I did, the more I actually would overconsume. And sometimes I would gain weight, and I'm like, I'm training for an Ironman. Why am I gaining weight? Well, once I started thinking about it and being mindful of it, it's just because I was just eating way too many calories because I thought I could because I'm training so much, which isn't always the case. And that has to do with how old you are, how much muscle mass you have, and there's just so many factors involved.
I like that too. And over time, whether it's Sean or anybody else, you'll find what your ideal weight is or your race weight is anyway. And it's going to take time and logging of I love what you said. Like, when was the last time you weighed 20 pounds less? Is it realistic to get back there? And what was your activities when you were 20 pounds less?
Right.
How similar were you in your eating habits and your lifestyle? And I think we talked about, I can't remember if we talked about it while we recorded or before that, is that I was trying to find out my recent weight loss or my body fat percentage and what I'd have to lose to get down to my goal weight. Yeah. And it's like, well, you know what? Maybe the way I'm at right now during training, even though I'm not 100% training specifically, but I'm just training, is it what I'm at right now? Because I've maintained a certain weight, we give or take 5 pounds. Well, maybe that is my training weight. But when I get serious, yeah, I can go a little bit less. But this is my walk around weight, my training weight. I'm consistent. Okay, let's be realistic about what I can and cannot lose. And then we can just shelve that and not have to worry about that issue anymore.
Yep, I like it.
Wendy, we've covered a lot in this half-hour podcast so far, 6 or 7 different questions. And looks good. Sounds good. 352 episodes. Going strong. And Wendy, you've got an event coming up in a matter of days. It's not a triathlon, though. it's a bit of a running event. You kind of run for a few hours.
Yeah, a few hours. We have 25 hours to be exact from start to finish. And so when I signed up for this race, it's a 74-mile trail race from Vogel State Park to Amacolta State Park. It's called the Georgia Death Race. I think it's a cool name. It's a cool concept. It's a cool course. It's very hard. I'm going to guess there's anywhere, they say between 12 and 15,000 feet of elevation gain. I don't know the exact amount. It's going to be a challenge. I'm looking forward to it. My why is, again, it's an ultra run. It's a cool concept. I have 25 hours to complete it, and we'll see what happens.
When you go into these ultras, are you aware and monitoring your pace, or are you just making sure you make the cutoff? What are you looking at when you do these longer runs?
Now that I have experience, I know what a realistic pace will be, and I'm monitoring my effort. I used to have a tendency to start off too much too soon, too much intensity too soon, even though, because again, at the beginning of any race, you're generally fresh and you're not tired, so you don't realize you're doing too much too soon, and especially for like an ultra that I'm doing. And so based on my most recent races in the last 12 months, I have a good idea of what's realistic based on the elevation gain, based on the weather of what I potentially could accomplish. And, I just have to monitor that, especially in the beginning, and the fueling becomes very much a focus in ultra running. And so the pacing changes though a lot, because I could be going uphill a steep incline for 2 miles, and my pace, I get 2 miles an hour. And then I run downhill, I'm running downhill maybe at 4 miles an hour. So that equates to about a 3 mile per hour average. So it changes a lot. So you're not so much focused on your pace at the moment. You're focused on your pace, like every hour. Did I do 3.5 miles an hour? So my previous 40-mile race that I did in February, my goal was 3.5 miles an hour. So each hour I was like, yep, I'm a little bit ahead of pace. I'm a little bit under pace. So I'm still within that goal. And I actually picked it up the second half, which was my goal too. I wanted to be able to bring it back a little bit stronger than I took it out. And one thing you also have to pay attention to is how long do you spend at the aid stations? So you have to take that into account for your overall time. You don't want to dilly-dally, but at the same time, you want to make sure you're getting the nutrition you need, sure you're filling up your hydration pack for the next, 3 hours until you get to the next aid station. So there is some planning involved from a time perspective to make sure you make that cutoff.
And because you've done a few of these now, are you so tactical where you're looking at the course and you're saying this stretch has this many feet of elevation, so naturally I'm going to be slower during this section, and I need to plan for it. I don't know if you have a map or you know that. All right, between miles 23 and 28, it's going to be slower no matter what, and these other miles are going to be flatter. So obviously my pace is going to be faster than usual, but it'll balance out.
Yep.
My effort will change.
I feel very prepared for this. I've struggled in a lot of ultras, and my goal for these races is to lessen the amount of time I'm struggling at the end. And so it's all about, getting the pacing down, getting the nutrition down, and being mentally strong to say, you do have 25 hours. I don't want it to take me 25 hours, but at the same time, the ultimate goal is always to finish, and to finish feeling strong and healthy and not dreading it, and not getting to the point, which I've had mental issues where I'm like, well, I'm out here, I quit, I want to quit. Can someone just come pick me up right now? And a lot of times that's not an option, because the only way out is to keep going forward because you're in the forest. So yeah, there's a lot that happens, and this is one way doing these things, it adds to that mental strength that I have.
Is this a loops or point to point?
It's point to point. Really?
So there's got to be that many different aid stations along the way.
Yeah.
And is it? Do you know if it's 25 miles? 25 hours, and people just know. Is it 75 miles? How many? 74?
74.
74. So it's almost 3 miles an hour. Is that what it works out to be?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it would be, right? So a person go, as long as I maintain 3 miles an hour, on average, I should finish this in 25 hours.
Yes.
Which is an odd number, a weird number to go. It's like if you start at 7, you finish at 8 the next morning. What? It's a mass start, and how many?
It used to be 24 hour. It used to be a 24-hour cutoff, and they added an hour this year. It's a 10th anniversary. So we start at 5 a.m. Saturday morning, and then so we have until 6 a.m.
Wow.
Sunday morning.
So a lot of people finishing in the dark.
Yeah. There's about 300 starters. I think I saw that about 296 maybe participants.
So 300 crazy people are deciding to, let's go run 74 miles.
Yeah. And again, 25 is a smaller number. So to think of it as I'm just going to be moving for 25 hours is a little bit easier mentally than thinking 74 miles.
More power to you.
Yeah, thanks.
Good for you. Good luck.
Thank you.
That's this weekend?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have a race report during the next podcast.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
And more of your questions as well. And you can leave those questions by sending Wendy an email at wendy@t2coaching.com. You can also go to the Facebook group, which is called the T2 Endurance Group on Facebook, or always check us out online, endurancehour.com. And that's where you can go and see all of the different training plans that we have to offer, from couch to sprint, couch to marathon, couch to Ironman. It's all there, 24 different plans, swimming, cycling, and running specific as well. For Wendy Mader, I'm Dave Erickson. Thanks so much for listening this week. Have a great week of training, racing, or recovery. We'll see you next time. Adios.
Adios.